Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that will work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable coaching to learn more.
Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Colin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Tom Williams. He's the head of Clari Align, and we are talking about collaborating our way to a higher close rate. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Colin. I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to this one too, because it's one of those skills that if you're in a closing role or if you're leading folks in a closing role, it's not necessarily one of the first couple things you're going to learn, but it is one of those base skills that's going to transfer and be useful no matter what type of sales cycle you're in. And so specifically, We're talking about collaboration throughout the close. I'm going to throw it to you. What are we talking about here? Because there's so many different directions we could, somebody might be thinking, collaborating with my customer. Help me put a fine point on this.
First of all, what I see is the best sellers already do this instinctively. And so when I think about collaboration, there's kind of three parts of it. First of all, you got to collaborate on understanding what the problem is. So a lot of discovery people just march in and they say, what keeps you up at night? And they think that they're done. But real discovery is a multi-layer analysis of the customer sharing what they think they know, and then the seller bringing in some kind of commercial insight that helps the customer understand the problem in a different way. So it is literally collaborative because neither of them, it's not possible for either of them to know the solution, but together they can get there. So that's one part. And then the thing that makes the collaboration part interesting is you need to build up trust in order to get the customer, because no customer is going to say, you just blur their soul out when you say, so what keeps you up at night? You need to come in with some kind of guidance and help and work them through this idea that you do know something that makes it worth them opening up or doing some self-analysis. So collaboration in the first part is building up trust with, first of all, your champion, but then the other parts of the buying team, extending through there and really getting a solid point of view on what is the customer's actual problem. Then working with them to understand, is it urgent and is it important? And that has to be a lot of give and take. Once you've got that business case in place, so that's collaboration to get a good business case. But then that's only maybe a third of the way there, because then you need to have collaboration for, well, how the hell do you actually buy this thing? The buyer has never bought your stuff before. They don't really know what they need to do. You've sold it 1,000 times, but you've never sold it to that particular customer before. So again, there's a give and a take of two people working together, and then that expanding out to two teams working together to figure out, how do we actually make this thing happen? That's halfway through. And then you have the actual collaboration of delivering on the wildly expansive promise that you just made. How do you actually collaborate to deliver the value that you promised or solve that problem that you think that you identified? So understanding what the problem is, understanding how to actually make it happen, get there, and then actually delivering it. Three different parts of buyer collaboration.
I love this. I think one thing that I did really well in the early part of my sales career, or maybe in the mid part of my sales career, was a really strong discovery, asking questions. It's what made doing this podcast a lot easier. I'm annoyingly curious with everybody and everything. I'll just keep asking questions until I get it. And then I'm like, okay, let's move on. And I think that was a strength that I brought into sales process. The thing I needed to work on most was, it's one point to get to that point of mutual understanding for me to understand, but that was more out of like an intellectual curiosity and not necessarily moving the sales process forward. The part I struggled to get to was, why is do nothing off the table? And I think adding in a little bit more structure after you do the first half of that discovery feels like one of those areas that can help us answer the question together, why is do nothing off the table, or why is it on the table still?
It's urgency is the hardest thing in the world, because I don't know how many times in my career I've heard, yeah, that's really cool. I would love that. And then the rep thinks, great, sold, nothing can go wrong. But it turns out that there's 10 other things in front of that, or it's not well quantified, or your champion is desperate for it, but they get stymied when they go to the CFO to say, I really want $1 million to buy this thing. And they're, well, why do you need it now? Couldn't we just wait till next quarter? And it's really easy in discovery to forget to ask that, or to get more than just a cursory answer like, oh, we're looking at it next quarter. That's not a really good answer. You got to figure out what the problem is and be able to quantify it. But it's really, really easy to say that in a podcast. Make sure you quantify the pain, and you can medic yourself all day long. Even I find myself in legitimate calls with all this talk, and it's so easy to skip that bit because the customer doesn't really know, and you just want to get the goddamn demo up and running. So where good process helps that, it gives the rep a bit of a backbone, not sort of like, I got to fill this in for my boss, but sharing with the customer, so collaborating with the customer, will get to a happy place where you can not waste your time if we walk through this process, because we've done this 1,000 times. And we know that if we answer these questions, not necessarily in strict order, but if we have this information in hand, then I, as the seller, can give you, as the champion, the things that you need to move this forward. Or, and I love this phrase, we can figure out that there's nothing to do and we can part as friends. Either one of those is fine. The only thing you can't do is keep rolling down and with your happy ears on, and then in stage 4, it suddenly goes dark because it turns out that you didn't early on ask those difficult questions or figure out together what those answers are.
I love this. And maybe we're dancing around a little bit. What we're really talking about here is mutual action plans. Is that fair?
I think there's 2 parts of it. Certainly mutual action plan is the, how do I get from where I am today to low risk path to actually delivering what you promise? But you can't have there's no point in getting to a mutual action plan until you've already agreed that there's a problem and there's some value. So you could arguably have an early mutual action plan item, which is, how do we together figure out if you actually have a problem that I can help you with? That's a totally reasonable mutual action plan milestone. But you probably don't know in those very early discussions, are we going to do a pilot? Are you just going to buy it because you trust me? Are we going to roll out wide? Or those kinds of details you don't know until you a little bit deeper into discovery. So what I would say is pulling up a mutual action plan in early discovery is good because it shows the customer, one, I've done this 1,000,000 times. And if we follow this, then you are reducing your risk. Every single milestone, you're lowering your risk exposure. But don't be too presumptive on dropping a big old plan on day one, say this is how it's going to be, because the customer's going to be like, I don't really know you. So you got to do this balance of introducing a rough outline of, here's how we've done it before. Let's focus on this first milestone, which is understanding, do you really have a fixable problem? And then we can, once we've agreed that there's a problem to be fixed, then we can work out the details of, is this going to be a 6-month thing to fix your problem? Is it a 2-year thing to fix your problem? Can we fix it if you just buy my thing and we're done? That's where the collaboration and the negotiation comes forth on how are we actually going to fix this problem. You're making a plan, and anytime you can make a plan, you are reducing risk. And anytime you do it together, it's much more likely to actually happen versus just dropping something on somebody else.
And so I appreciate that the right time to start is kind of at the beginning, but not quite too early. And it is a delicate balance of, a sales conversation is always a delicate balance of trying to be there for the customer to show up and hold some space for them, give them a chance to speak, but also to understand the things that you need to understand as part of your process. And so it's always a little bit of a give and take in those first couple of calls. So as I'm understanding it, the right time is near the beginning, but not to be just to start with kind of the tip of the process. Is that a fair summary?
I like to, in the very, very early beginnings, I don't bring in the mutual action plan. In the very beginning, I really am establishing credibility by having that point of view about their business. And it was one of our early investors actually said, what do you know that nobody else knows about this industry? And so if you can, as a rep, walk into the customer with that knowledge. I know something that you don't know, and it can come from your customer, from your company. It doesn't have to be just your personal insight. Arm the rep with a really nice insight that shows that you're worth listening to. But then as soon as you go, there's something here, then say, well, this is typically what it looks like, because then you're also able to weed out somebody who's like, oh, actually, I haven't got any budget till 5 years from now, or I'm not the decision maker, or any of the real hard disqualifiers that you would want to know as soon as possible. Like they might say, oh, I don't have any facilities in Nevada, so I can't use the Nevada solution. And the sooner you can get to that kind of information, the better off you'll be. So a good mutual action plan can help the rep weed out those early disqualifiers as well.
Love that. I'm curious. I want to ask you what it is, but I first want to maybe just steal some language for you, because this is a new thing that I haven't done before, and I suspect people listening may not have done it before. How do you introduce the idea on a call?
Yeah. So the easiest way to do it is say, sounds like there's a problem, then I think we have a way to approach this. Can I share how we've done this in the past and what it looks like? High level, walk through the next 2 or 3 months of what it will take to go from here to your problem being fixed and you looking really good in front of your boss. And it's kind of interesting. If they say, no, I don't care what those steps would be, then that's a pretty good indicator that they are not well qualified. But they should want to know, does this vendor actually know what they're doing, and do they have a plan, or are they just going to try to sell me something? So emphasize, this is not, I actually call it an app. It's an action plan. It's not mutual yet. This is just what we've done with other people. And take a look at this. Does this sound right? Is there anything that you would need to change? Anything that's wrong? Anything that's really standing out with you? And walk through it. Just spend like 20 minutes on the high level 6 months worth of work that we need to do to fix your problem. And what's cool about it is, if you don't end it on the last thing is selling the product. End it on the plan is, here we are, and here your problem is solved. And one of the little tiny details is that you buy my stuff. But the big focus is, here we are today with your problem. Here we are in 2 months where you don't have a problem, or 6 months. What do we need to do to get there? And that's exactly what like Deloitte and Touche or Pricewaterhouse would do. They would come in and say, here's a plan to fix the problem. So you want to present a similar kind of plan where it's not about buying the stuff, it's about fixing the problem. And then work with them to, the first couple milestones should be more detailed, and the latter ones are a bit fluffier because you don't know yet. And it's okay not to know, but like, is 6 months okay, or do they need it done in 2 months? The sooner you can find out those big guiding principles, the less likely of having a horrible surprise at the end is going to be for both sides. Because you don't want it where they start walking down with it and then they're like, well, Jesus, I didn't realize that it's a 4-month implementation window. I'm going to completely miss my deadline and I'm going to get fired. And that has totally happened where nobody, oh, I thought you knew there was a 4-month implementation window. Get the stuff lined out, and then your credibility will be boosted as well, because they'll see that you're looking at their problem, not at selling your stuff, which is going to make them more likely to want to open up and collaborate and actually, frankly, speed up the deal, because there'll be less reticence on their end.
Just another selfish question. Like, so I'm thinking specifically through the lens of predictable revenue. Like we do consulting, but most of our business is booking meetings for people. In order for the customer to solve the problem, we need to do our part, but then their AEs need to do their part. And so do I build this mutual action plan for us executing on our part, or do I stretch it all the way to their AEs doing their part and getting the closed won deal?
Definitely all the way through, because they have a responsibility, and you can use the plan to hold both sides accountable. If you're on the selling team, it's not just you. There's a solutions engineer probably involved. There's a customer success person on your side involved. They are just as accountable to make sure this deal goes smoothly as you are. But likewise, the buyer has some responsibilities. They need to bring in that CFO or whoever it is. And if they don't, then the whole thing's going to fall apart. So you should definitely show the whole story, because that gives the it gives all the parties the understanding, why am I working on milestone 1 right here? What's the benefit to me? What's milestone 8 is where you actually get the payoff, but you've got to do 1 to get to 8. So it provides context, especially if there are later stage decision makers who come in, they don't know anything until you've been talking for 6 months. They come in and either they want to start all the way back from 0 again and you've lost all that momentum, or they can see, all right, you did milestone 1, 2, 3, and 4. Here I am, and we need 5, 6, and 7 in the future. So they see, okay, we're part of a plan that's moving forward at speed. So yeah, context is great, and go all the way through to the problem being solved for sure.
Love this, and I can feel my sales process changing throughout this podcast. I'm very excited. And hi to James, our AE, who is absolutely going to be the next person who watches this.
Hi, James.
Awesome. So help me understand, how do you put together, I understand there's different kind of steps and stages, and it kind of starts with where we are today, and it goes to helping the buyer achieve the ultimate value that they're seeking. And there are stages in between. If we don't have one, how do I put one together?
Well, first of all, it doesn't need to be complicated. There's nothing wrong with 4 milestones to get where you need to be. Ideally, if you've done a bunch of deals yourself, then you can see the patterns. At the worst, you can map it to your sales stages. But ideally, you have a concept from your marketing department about what the buyer journey looks like. Because the weird thing to remember is the buyer started their journey probably before they talked to you, unless you're awesome at cold calling. So if you can imagine in your head the mix of the buyer journey and first of all, they're seeking to educate themselves, then they're seeking to validate some vendors, then consummate the deal. At the same time, you have a seller's journey. So get from your marketing department that buyer's journey, from your sales team, get your sales stages, and look to see where they line up. And boom, that's your mutual action plan, because both of you need to accomplish these jobs to be done in order for this deal to close, and then in order for the customer to fix their problem. So look at the jobs to be done for you, which is going to be in your sales stages. You probably have exit criteria that you need to, check off, build those in, but don't forget to put yourself in the shoes of the customer and ask, what jobs do they have to be done? One thing that I really like advocating is when you have and this is more for a leader, when you have your template of what you think is the right buyer journey and sales journey glued together, go to a recent one customer. Everyone has like the friendly winners who you just liked them as people, and now they're a brand new customer, and say, I'm wondering if you and I can talk about that buying experience that you just had, and I wonder if this would have helped guide you at all. And either they say, that was complete trash, that's not my experience at all, this wouldn't help, in which case you can refine it. Or they say, yeah, this would have helped. But either way, the kind of side benefit is they're going to feel listened to, which is a great relationship builder. And you're going to get an insight as a leader that you didn't have, because you're going to hear some inside baseball from a buyer where they're like, I really found the procurement process was really difficult, or your pilot was real hassle because we had these sticking points. And you're not going to find those things out unless you ask, but they will tell you. So use some direct customer feedback from a newly won friendly to look at your template of your mutual action plan and say, would this have helped? Does this kind of reflect what we did together? That's one thing. And then the other thing is that one size doesn't fit all. So I would absolutely expect that your commercial or your emerging size business teams have a radically different mutual action plan than your enterprise team, because they have different timescales. First of all, they're going to have different expectations. They're going to have different members of the buying committee who you would want to include. And then the third thing is, don't forget that people are a really important component of the plan. It's not just what are the actions that we're going to do between now and the value being realized. It's understanding who do we think would be involved to actually work on it. So on my side, I know for a proof of value, I need to bring in an SC, and I'm going to need to bring an IT person and myself running the show. On your side, you are going to need the following people. One, that will boost credibility, and two, it will help the rep kind of suss out who is on the buying committee, because you can say, we know that we need a senior IT administrator in order to implement the pilot successfully. Who is that? And all of a sudden now you know it's Bill. And you can say, well, let's bring Bill on a call, and so that we can set up as to why he's helping us spend this time doing that. So look at your buying journey, look at your selling journey, test it with a friendly, and then don't forget the people. And don't overthink it. 4 milestones is absolutely fine. And then the final one is, don't end on close. End on implementation at the very, very soonest, or ideally you're ending on actual like problem solved and working backwards from that.
Beautiful. The thing that I'm missing in my head is I understand how to get the milestones. I appreciate the element of kind of getting the people, understanding who all is involved. But all I can think of are the 4 milestones as headers in a blank Google Doc. So yeah. What goes in each stage or in each milestone?
At the dumbest, it can be those exit criteria that somebody in your RevOps team has labored over and sweated over and makes you do against your will. So that's the dumbest level. And really it's, what are the things that one of us, either me as the seller or you as the buyer or our respective teams, what do we have to do in order to complete this milestone? So I like to split mine out into, I have a discovery milestone, which I'll typically call like getting to know you or how we can help, something friendly, not disco, not qualification, but something in the buyer's language. And then I like to do a proof of concept or business case or business value as my second milestone. And that's where we say, okay, I understand what your problem is, I think. How am I going to prove to you that this is worth your time? And then you're defining, because you don't want to put a pilot in if you can avoid a pilot. So put in like, how am I going to prove this to you? And if they say, look, man, let me just talk to 5 customers, sweet, done. Or if they say, we're going to need a 10 geo, 14,000 person pilot, you say, okay, that's going to be $60,000 a day. Okay, great, we got a plan. Then you got good old commercials, then implementation, and then if you can, then problem solved at the end. But honestly, it's fine. If implementation and go live is the final one, that's okay, as long as commercials isn't the final one.
Gotcha. And it's effectively each of the steps in between, or each of the action items that we need to do.
Yeah, and then what do we need to do? Like somewhere we need to get an NDA in place. I know that. And don't forget about it. So let's throw that up early. Somewhere we need to decide whose paper is it going to go on? Who are the people who are going to be involved in the evaluation? And so by just having those things written down someplace, it prompts the buyer, prompts the rep to ask the buyer. And what I like to do is I like just like flashing it on the screen. I'm not making a big production out of, you need to sign up. One super old customer, they had a spreadsheet and they made the buyer sign it. Like, I agree to this mutual action plan. And my friends would be like, they would just delete that line from the spreadsheet. So you don't need to like present it to them like it's some golden thing. Just pull it up on your screen and say, this is kind of how I'm rolling. Does this look right to you? And if they say no, it's not right, then like, great. So what is right? And they'll say, we got hacked last year, so security is really important to us. So you say, great, well, why don't we add a level 11 security audit? Right. Let's start that. Let's do that next week so we can get that concern out of the way, or whatever it is. And now you're getting that give and take and turning it from a pretty generic template into a real story that they can take to their bosses to, boss, I have a plan to fix the problem. It looks like this.
If I'm silent, it's just because my brain is like, I had one great podcast. I mean, I've done 300 plus, but one that really sticks out was like Jamie Bust from Zendesk, or when she was managing North America and she was forecasting quota within 1%. And that was the like customer verifiable outcomes and MedPick system. And that kind of like broke my brain. And this feels like a continuation of that of that process. It feels like it's dovetailing in, but it somehow is adding more context.
I wrote a paper actually about how mutual action plans are the perfect front end to a good medic framework. My biggest criticism of medic is that there's no sense of time in it. You can have the metrics, the economic decision maker, the paper, all that stuff, and no idea when it's actually going to close. So, and it's very easy to have an unvalidated medic framework where it's just the rep's opinion that all those things were done, and turns out that they didn't even talk to the customer, or the customer gave a half-assed answer. So putting it out there in front of them and letting the rep communicate why these things are important. And I wouldn't use the M, the E, the D, the D, but you can make sure that all those different criteria are covered at various points throughout the milestones.
So we're almost taking kind of medic and putting it into a little bit more customer friendly, easier to access.
Customer facing, customer validated. And then I like qualification because there's two people whose time are being wasted when you have a bad deal. And the buyer should be just as happy to be qualified out or well qualified as the seller wants to, because it just kills me the amount of economic effort that gets wasted on bad deals where either side are wasting huge amounts of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the number of customers that I think if I would have shown something like this to and said, hey, it takes 6 months before you're going to get your first close one deal. And they're like, oh shit, well, I need 12 close one deals by month 4. And it's like, well, this is not a good fit.
Yeah.
You can go find magic beans elsewhere.
Or you say, well, look, I'll stay over the weekend to build out the templates, your scripts. I will work those extra hours to get you to a deliverable by 4 months. But it also means that you need to buy twice as many seats, because here's the yield. So if we want to get to that timeline working backwards, I'll stay late. We'll do a rush order and you'll buy twice as many seats. It won't be as efficient as normal, but it will get you to your deadline and make you look good. Thank God we had this conversation. So that's absolutely a real case of resetting those buyer expectations, and you can conceivably get more money out of them if they're actually driven by something important.
It's like how to tell if somebody's a better salesperson than you without actually them saying, I'm a better salesperson than you. I love it. So we've explored the mutual action plan process. We've got an idea of kind of how to come up with stages. How do we figure out? I think I've got a good sense of how do I figure out what happens? What are the kind of action items at each stage? Because I'm basically mapping my med pick and my exit criteria into each of the stages, and then I'm going to add in my buyer's journey kind of criteria, things that they're going to have to do, and then there's the mutual action plan. Oh, and people, and don't forget about people, of course.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put that together. I'm going to test it with a friendly close, somebody who just closed, and walk them through, hey, would this be helpful?
So yeah, would it have been helpful? And they're like, yeah, man, because this part was gnarly. Like, this part was a real pain in the butt. I barely got this part through my team. And then okay, well, maybe we should put a couple more discrete actions in that milestone, or add a pre-funk milestone to make it smoother. You've discovered something about your own process is not very good, so you can fix it. And then the really cool thing is you can roll it out to the whole team. So now everybody's doing that. I really like in this day and age where the assumptions from 2020 are not true anymore. The free money, I think, is gone. Everybody just buying everything on their massive ass tech stack. I think those days are gone, and I don't think it's a temporary blip, and it's going to get back to the good old days where everybody just buys everything willy-nilly. So as all of us are kind of navigating these new waters, the faster you can move, the more likely you are to get ahead. And so when you have good templates and you're essentially like codifying your sales process in a way that the rep can use on a day-to-day, not the February 1 sales enablement at SKO, which is fantastic, in Vegas, but actually using it every day in deals. And then when something happens, change the template. So now everybody is responding to, oh, Sarah moves the security check earlier in her process. That stops an unexpected slowdown every single deal. Everybody move a security check and bring it up in your process. And, you just got that template, and now everybody's doing the same thing. You can see the changes. It's when birds fly around, it's called murmuration. And so if you have a minute to watch some swallows or some swifts murmurating around, it's absolutely mesmerizing. But that's what you want your revenue organization to be able to do, is everyone's going the same, flying the same way. And that kind of internal collaboration is made possible with process and templates. They don't need to be rocket science. It's just like, hey guys, this is what we do, validated by the customer, and now all of you are flying around together towards a peace and harmony.
And I learned a new word today, murmurization.
Murmurate, or murmurate.
Very cool. So we've talked a little bit about how to kind of put one together. We talked a little bit about, when to introduce it, but you said something a few minutes ago about, you don't just screen share and like, we're going to spend 45 minutes working through this document, this template. You kind of flash it to the customer. Do you share it with them? Like, help me understand kind of how you visually introduce it and what's the take behind or leave behind with the customer.
Well, the customer, so putting yourself in the customer's shoes, they have different needs at different times during the sales cycle. So early on, they're trying to figure out, do I trust this guy? That's the number one thing. Does this person have something that I want? And is he going to jack me? And that's the number one job. So you want to, we call it bookending. You pull up that mutual action plan at the beginning of the call, say, here's what we've accomplished in the past couple of weeks. Here's what we're trying to do today. And you close it and you do your meeting. And then in the end, you pull it up again. You say, okay, we accomplished what we said we were going to accomplish. Dopamine hit of done. What's next? And actually what's cool about that is it stops let me get back to you 2 weeks from now, because you're able to, set that meeting at the end of the subsequent meeting. So it speeds up the process a little bit and shows the customer that you have a plan. So that's building the credibility. In the POC, or certainly in the commercials, they're going to be much more active, because they're going to be pulling in people from their team to do stuff. And all of a sudden it's flipped from being you want everything to close fast to they want everything to close fast. Because once they've decided they want your thing, they want it, goddamn now. So what are the steps that we need to do? What do I need to do to navigate my own sales process? My own buying process. So in that case, they're going to be more interested in actually having a copy of this thing that's accessible, up to date, so that they can orchestrate their own side of who needs to do what. That's where having it online is the best and most convenient. And then the third place where they get really into it is in the handover, because now everybody's swarming on implementing this thing, and your team's going to want to know what was actually promised. What did we say we were going to do? Their team's going to, half the people didn't even know there was a deal until it's been signed, and now they've been told they need to implement this thing. So they'll want to be in there like a project plan, an implementation plan, thick as thieves, to actually implement it. So much lighter at the beginning. I want credibility. I can just look at it. And in the middle of the deal, there's some more orchestration, so a little bit more access to detail and seeing stuff. And at the end, and then into it, as it evolves into an ongoing relationship, you can have a plan together to say, what are we going to do for the next year? And that's going to drive your QBRs and stuff like that. So again, they'll want to be involved in that, so that they can show their bosses that, hey, it was a good idea of mine to spend $1 million with these guys.
And I love that, because I do feel like, especially in our process, we do some things to, we're going deep into discovery. And on the kickoff call, like I join, if I'm part of the sales process, I'll join the kickoff, same with our AEs. I feel like there's a knowledge transfer that kind of needs to happen, but sometimes, in ways we've done it before, it's just a total reset. You deal with sales hands you off to implementation. You've had this really rich conversation. We built a lot of trust with your AE. Now you're in implementation, and all of that knowledge and that information that has been shared is lost and needs to get rebuilt. And now the customer's back down to zero.
it's worse than that. Paul Dawson is one of my favorite sellers here at Clari. He and I were chit-chatting the other day, and his point was at the 1 minute before the signature, both sides, executive teams are fully on board, everyone's engaged, and they're all like doing it. And then you sign, and all of a sudden now it's being handed off to two lower level people. And they're like, well, why the hell can't I do an upsell? Why can't I do an expansion? And it's because the senior sellers, the senior stakeholders are completely disengaged. So the more you can keep those the senior people engaged through the plan, the more likely you are to be able to maintain that momentum and relationship even after the implementation. The other thing that I like about implementations is like you've had a year-long deal, and then you have a half-hour handover call. I was like, what did you guys do for a year? If I can explain it in half an hour. So, and then finally, it always burns me when I've been a purchaser of software. I spilt my guts to the rep. You know, she knows me. She knows my pains and all my needs. And then some new person turns up. So what's the problem? I was like, didn't I just do that? And now you're like, it's definitely a sinking feeling of, you didn't listen to me after a while. I just got baited and switched. So having that plan in place is going to make a big difference to the continuity.
100%. Even if it's not a bait and switch, it's a wind out of the sales.
Your sales. Yeah, that's probably more accurate. Yeah.
At an exceptionally pivotal point, because you've just made a purchase. We want to demonstrate to the buyer that, hey, we care, we're learning, we want to XYZ, but we're going to start fresh. And those, like the last 3-4 calls you had with our sales team, we're going to rehash a lot of that in the next 90 minutes.
That's just a recipe for buyer's remorse too. Or where the hell is it? I gave you $100,000 yesterday. Where's my results? And if you can share, look, we told you it's going to take 6 weeks for the first value to come in, and it's going to take 8 weeks for the main value to come in. Look, we're exactly on track. We're exactly where we said we would be. That's going to make a big difference to not only the adoption rate, but then also you're going to be able to expand faster because you delivered on your promises and shown consistently that you walk the walk. So really important, especially nowadays. We're seeing a trend towards smaller average contract value at the initial smaller average contract value. So that means that you need to expand faster. And the more you can show that you deliver on your promises, and the faster you'll be able to get that expansion deal in place.
Of that. I'm curious, we talked a little bit about how to, I guess, bring it up in the sales conversation, but how do you introduce it to the customer? How do you sell them on the idea of doing a mutual action plan? Because in some ways it is more work for them.
It's all about risk mitigation. So if you put their CFO up as the bad guy and say, at some point, you want this thing now. I've convinced you that I can fix your problem, make you a happier person. So now we together have to figure out how to get this through your organization. Your CFO is going to ask a bunch of really tough questions, and ultimately they are predisposed to say no or let's do it later. If you can show them that we have a well thought out implementation plan where we know all the different touch points in your organization that it's going to impact, what not just the budgetary costs, but all the change management costs are going to be, and that you have a plan to ameliorate those change management costs, that's the kind of thing that the CFO will go, oh, okay, I'll grant you that budget. So it's the key is they need to want your thing. So you need to have that business case nailed, and they want the thing. And now you're being an advisor to help them navigate their internal processes with this plan. And that's why they're going to want to be into the plan at those later stages, because they want your thing. Yeah, and throw that CFO up as the boogeyman. Now, what's it going to take to get it past her? She needs to see a rock solid, zero risk, nothing can go wrong. I've thought about the fact that this is going to add extra time to the IT staff for the next 2 quarters, but after that, it'll die down. I've thought of all that stuff, and I've documented it here, and here's the plan, and I've already talked to the CTO, and we had 2 meetings right here and here that were already in the plan, and we have another 4 set up here, and here. It's taken care of. We thought of everything. And that's different than, Have you heard the thing that's like, don't tell me I'm funny. Don't tell me you're funny, make me laugh. Same thing. Don't say trust me. Just show me you got a goddamn plan.
Totally. I'm starting to think this document is evolving a little bit into frequently asked questions. How much of this is, a blank space for me to write down in the document, these are the things we're going to do, like net new content that I'm adding into this template of sorts. And then how much of this is, okay, I know your CFO is going to ask these questions. These are the questions that these are the answers to those questions. We've got them already mapped out here.
You can do it in two ways. I've seen plenty of, if you're not using software, then I like spreadsheets because you can tab them out and you can put dates in cells. It forces you not to write a book. It forces you to be more summary oriented. But there's plenty of places who have the plan and then the people and then an FAQ at the end. That's totally acceptable. What I try to do is I try to turn those FAQs into things that we need to solve. And so I stick them in as an action item, in the right place in the plan. So I know that the CFO is going to ask about the IT overhead expectations. So in one of the milestones, let's have a IT meeting or IT overhead discussed and planned. And now it's not asked. The question isn't asked, and we already answered it. We answered it proactively because we know what we're doing.
Really interesting. I love that. I don't know if you can tell I'm building one of these in my head as we speak, because we do so many of these things, but there hasn't been this piece to pull it all together to help help our AE implement it.
It makes a really nice home actually for the deal. One of the things I like to do is, I've got 10 deals running. It's really hard to remember across those 10 what am I supposed to be doing next. And the worst thing you can do as a rep is drop the ball, because that wrecks your credibility. So if you have your 10 plans, then you can look to see, oh yeah, I've got to do this one next. And I said I would do it. I call it, can I go home? It's Friday. I've done all the milestones that were due this week. If I have, then great. It's Thursday. I'm done. I can go home. Versus, Christ, it's Thursday and I still have a whole bunch of promises that I made, but it's organized for you. So you have to hold less in your brain, which gives you more space to be more creative, more personable, because you're not storing up all that space. Like, did I forget something? It's a horrible feeling. And I'm sure you've dropped the ball with a customer. Just feel like such a chump. I hate that feeling of dropping the ball because it's my fault. And now they're not going to believe me on the other stuff, and nobody's happy. And all because I didn't write something down properly.
I committed to doing something and then I didn't do it. It's the number one greatest sin in sales.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've built the plan. I think I've got an understanding of kind of how to build the plan and when to introduce it to the customer. I want to take a step back and think about if I'm now a sales leader, and I'm going to teach this process. I'm going to build this process myself. I'm going to teach it to James, one of my AEs.
You'll probably find your top. Talk to your top 2 or 3 sellers. They probably already either it's like a lot of people write a confirmation email, like here's all the things we said, here's what we're going to do. I guarantee you, your best sellers are doing this in some way or other, validating what they heard, and then having a clear set of next steps with dates and times. Who's going to do it? It just depends how organized or what format it's been organized. But sorry, I interrupted.
No. So I think it's a great point is to go look through those confirmation, the summary emails. We send those. Our deals are a little less complex, so they're generally, fairly similar. But I think it's a really great point because I have to be considering of everybody who's on the other end of this mic, which is not just me and my team. It's the, however many people are going to listen to this episode. So let's say I'm implementing this and I build the template, I train my reps on how to do this. How do I make sure that they're following the plan? Because reading through, if I got 5 sellers and they each got 10 deals, reading through 50 docs on a weekly basis seems hectic.
Inspection is the place to do it. So you get what you inspect. And the reason I like having the mutual action plan be a core constituent of my inspection process is when you look at your section, like how many emails did they send this week? or how many meetings have you had? That says what you did do. But the mutual action plan will tell you what you didn't do. So you didn't have the meeting with the IT department to figure out the overhead that it's going to take them. We know that that's going to be a stopping block for the CFO in 2 weeks. So this deal's not what you think it is because you haven't got the blessing from IT. That's really productive inspection. And it's going to let the manager suss out risk way earlier, because that, if you like, that ticking time bomb of the unvalidated IT team is just sitting there waiting. But you wouldn't know if you're just doing actions of what you did, because it didn't say I didn't talk to the IT guy this week. So inspecting on those is what's going to help. And of course, yeah, I'm biased because Clari acquired my company so that this could all be built into the Clari platform. But you can totally do it. And we see every day hundreds of organizations who just do it with spreadsheets. And there, what you do is you just put a link to the Google Sheet into the opportunity. And so when you're cruising through the opportunities during inspection, it's sitting right there, just one click and boom, it pops up. Not as cool as it popping up built into your revenue platform, but your net result is the rep sees the manager is referencing this as the source of truth for where are we on this deal, not, boss, everything's cool, I got it, nothing can go wrong, trust me. Rather, here's where we are on the plan and we've accomplished all the things. We skipped this one's blocked, and here's my plan to get it unblocked. So connecting to the Salesforce or your CRM of choice by Clari, or just have it there for when you're doing your inspections. And the key is that the manager has to be seen looking at it and referring to it and saying, I don't see that in the plan. Because one, it's going to make the manager's job easier. They can do a lot more prep in advance of the call, which frees up the actual inspection 30 minutes, the one-on-one, to figure out how to fix the problem. In Clari, what's cool about it is that it actually highlights the ones that are red, so you can just jump to the bad news and focus on what's not working, rather than spending all your time figuring out what the bad news is. But either way, having them written down and connected into the opportunity is going to solve that problem for inspection.
Gotcha. I was trying to think, and yeah, I mean, this podcast is now sponsored by Clari. Thank you so much. Joking aside, I was kind of thinking like, man, if this is my pipeline, I got 29 deals in there. I'm like, how am I going to, I don't want to open up 29 files. I'm probably going to start the inspection process at a certain pipeline stage. So yeah, once we confirm, they've brought all the buyers to the discovery call.
That would be a vendor of choice. That would be a totally reasonable exit criteria. A vendor of choice, you've got to, for $50,000 deals at stage 3 vendor choice, you got to have a pretty healthy looking mutual action plan. And its absence in a way is a damning point of disqualification, because it means that the rep doesn't have the relationships with the various parts of the buying team that they would expect. They haven't done the validation, or they're pure geniuses and they can do everything just like in their heads. But chances are they didn't do it. And so it's a good validation for you to say, if it's worth me putting my time in for this $1 million deal, it's worth you writing down the goddamn plan and validating it with the customer.
Yeah, that's fair. I want to talk about what are some of the risks and challenges in doing, mutual action plans.
I mean, obviously, it is more effort. It's easier not to do anything and just remember everything, especially at the moment, certainly easier. There may be repercussions of that strategy, but here at 4:00 on a Friday, it's a lot easier not to bother. So the risk is that you're going to do more work. The challenge is not doing repetitive work. So you want to make sure when you're building these processes as a manager that you're not saying, Colin, I want you to fill in all these 400 fields inside Salesforce. I also want you to write a confirmation email every time you have a meeting with a customer. I want you to write a meeting report to me that tells me what you said, and I want you to fill out a mutual action plan. That's not going to work because you're asking the rep to do more work. So the risk is that you accidentally bump up the paperwork process, and that gives the rep the opportunity to say, look, I would have hit quota, man. I would have, but I was filling in all these forms. and a TPS report and all that. So you don't want to give them an excuse for that. So make sure that whatever expectation you're setting, like we use maps to run our deal inspection. That means that they shouldn't be expected to also write an email, for example, because it's double work. So that's one of the risks. The other risk is that if you are too heavy-handed with it, you can appear assumptive to the customer. And you drop this plan on them, and it says that we're meeting here, and on the 3rd of October, we're going to have a pilot, and on the 5th of December, you're going to buy it, and on the 6th of January, you're gonna have your renewal. And I don't even know you. So it's important that when you're presenting this thing, it's an idea, it's an outline or a rough sketch of how we could work together. I'm not making any assumptions, but this has been helpful for my other customers so that we can get through the detail work of working together and make it smoother. So not be too assumptive. And then I'm trying to think if there's a... One sec. The other risk is that you can get... Anytime you write something down, there is a risk of it becoming ossified, so that now it's stuck in stone. And I've certainly seen this when people have medic fields in Salesforce. All of a sudden, the junior rep is saying, hey, what's your economic decision maker? Tell me your metrics. And it's obviously that they're reading through a punch list of questions in order to do their job, not help the customer fix their problem. So it's important that the rep in their heart understands that the reason we're doing this collaboration is to fix their problem. If you're one of the reps who just wants to sell as much stuff as possible and doesn't care about the repercussions, then you're not going to last very long, because your reputation will precede you, and you'll be known as somebody who just says whatever I got to sell the most expensive thing I can to you, whether you need it or not. And that's not a good way to go through life. You may have a slightly nicer watch in your 20s, but you'll be an unhappy person in your 30s. And your spouse is going to leave you. It's because you're not a good person. You got to figure out what the customer's problem is and help them fix it and make money along the way. Yeah, absolutely, you got to make money, but you don't fall into the trap of XYZ 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 being too checklist oriented. Make sure that you're focused on fixing the customer's problem.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that when training new reps on, we had this new "Are we a fit call" template. And you listen to the questions, and I remember this one rep, and it wasn't their fault, but it sounded like their favorite book in the world was the Checklist Manifesto, and they were just going like one, and just rapid fire. And it's like, man, this didn't feel like a conversation. This felt like an interrogation, and you're playing bad cop.
Yeah. Well, that's why. I mean, the advantage there is if you show. That's why it's so critical to end on value, not on close, because if you show the customer, look, this is basically, we need to cover these things. We don't need to cover them all in exact order, but I know that if we don't have an IT inspection of your IT workload, I know that this isn't going to happen, and we may as well not bother. So it's going to come sometime in the future. We just keep in mind, we've got to get that done at some point. Otherwise, we're wasting our time here. That's actually, now that it's in context to the customer of, we need to do these things to accomplish what I want, you've kind of flipped it on, why are we doing this thing? And the checklist mentality is one. And when you go through a checklist, you don't know when it ends, which is, you're cleaning the house and like, what do I do next? And it never ends. So checklist, they don't know why you're asking me these questions, but a plan, overview, dialed into the thing we need to do next, they got the context of why you're asking. And that makes a really big difference in that collaborative feeling of, what are we doing together?
Love that. I feel like I could keep grilling you forever, but I do want to keep the conversation moving forward. I want to run an idea. This is just kind of off the cuff. And I promise I'm not trying to just like plant predictable revenue plugs in the podcast. I'm genuinely like trying to work this through, because our implementation team is working on basically a new customer playbook, which is the second half of, the mutual action plan.
Yeah.
And I'm working on this with a new AE. I'm also working on the new predictable revenue methodology, which is a kind of meet, disco, manage, nurture. And these are effectively the 4 stages to getting value from a sales development program.
Mm-hmm.
So could I make, obviously there's going to be are we a fit, the commercial, the business case, but then could the last kind of 4 milestones be meet, disco, manage, nurture? Meet is us doing our thing, manage, nurture, be disco, manage, nurture being, the other stages in the customer's process.
Yeah. Because no, what I kind of like that, because the contract is a tiny little detail. It's not important to the customer. That's not that's the, I call it like, thank God I gave you money day is later on, like I made a real good decision, versus contract day, which is like I get to boat payment day. That's your high point, but their low point. Cause like, Jesus, I hope he's not going to jack me. So by focusing on, these are all the things, here's a plan to fix your problem. So yeah, having that ongoing thing, I would say actually that there's kind of 3 parts to the mutual action plan. There's the get to the deal, the fit, there's implementation, and then there's this ongoing thing. How do we iterate on this program that we're working on, this partnership that we have together, and make it cooler for not just this year, but next year and the year after that? What are we working towards? So we want to have a mutual plan of how we're going to work together for the next 5 years, not just the next 2 months. So if you think of it that way, like this whole thing, we're just trying to collaborate, and so we can both make each other money.
And I think to your point, this doesn't end at close.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't end at close. It ends in your case on that you had that flywheel at the end, right? Of the continuing to set the meetings, and that's what you want. Like, and then you might have a quarterly check-in on, is the messaging still working? Are we still going after the right personas? Or shit, we've seen the most responsive persona has changed since pandemic. All right, well, let's write some scripts around those. Or we've seen that phone calls are back in vogue again because there's so much trash email out there. Let's check in once a quarter and see if our strategy and our messaging and all that is working. And then a year later, when you're renewing, you say, look, we met these 4 times, we adjusted the strategy on these 4 dates, and we saw the improvements as such. That's why you should stick with us and not even think about going somewhere else, because we're your long-term partner. It wasn't just close and then, auto repeat. You're continuing to mutually collaborate.
Tom, I love this. I really appreciate you having on the show. And I definitely feel like this is one that I could just keep going for hours and hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. I know I've been wanting to ask you throughout the episode, because I'm trying to put together a template in my head. Do you have a template version of this?
Yeah.
We could borrow.
Yeah, absolutely. It was cool. So 3 years ago, something like that, I talked to on the order of 50 sales leaders. I just called them all up and spent a lot of time gathering, 100-something mutual action plans from up and down the spectrum. I put them all together. I actually wrote an article for Sales Hacker. It's the ultimate guide to mutual action plans. And from all those different examples, I created a single template that is now available. You can get it from clari.com. Has it available where it's a Google sheet, and it's got all the different bits that you would want. There's a dumb version, like it's a super simple version, and there's a more sophisticated version, plus a couple of tips and tricks and all that. You're absolutely welcome to download that either from the Sales Hacker article or from Clari.
Beautiful. I think I found it right here. It's on the Clari blog.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Awesome. I will verify and then make sure I add it into the link in the show notes here.
Cool.
And I know on next Tuesday, so today is the 6th. Anyway, sometime at the beginning of September, in the next couple of weeks here, you've got something new coming out with Clari. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, thank you for asking, Colin. So we have Align. My company was DealPoint. We got acquired 2 years ago tomorrow by Clari, and now Clari Align is the collaboration workspace and mutual action plan solution, all integrated into the platform. Great way to run your revenue. But I've always had this mission of really wanting to get this collaboration. You can tell I'm passionate about it. I want us to all collaborate and make the global economy slightly more efficient. That's my mission. So to that end, we are releasing a free tier of Clari Align. So you can have 5 seats of Align, no cost. It can still talk to Clari if you're a Clari customer. If you're not a Clari customer, it can run standalone, or it can push and integrate back into Salesforce if you have a Salesforce. No limits at all, as many buyers as you want, as many rooms as you want, collaboration rooms. The only limit is you can only have 5 seats per organization. And the idea is on seat number 6, you'll get a call from somebody at Clari to say, hey, you should buy the proper thing. So that's available at clari.com/align. And it's just you'll sign up and you'll get an account automatically spun up for you, and you'll be off to the races. So
perfect.
Between that and the spreadsheet, of course, I'm biased. I would use the software because it makes it really easy to share files within it. So if you have your business case, or if you have any collateral or videos, anything, just throw it all in one place, and then you can track the buying team and the selling team as they engage with your stuff. And you have a consistent single place to store what are we working on together, how are we going to get there, who are the stakeholders, and what are the files that we need to make it happen. So all for free.
Amazing. I love that. I would definitely recommend starting with the template, because I think starting with process first and then technology later to come in and implement it is probably my motto for this podcast. But I 100% agree. I'm going to start with the spreadsheet myself, and then if we do a couple and it works, I'll be the next free.
There's another asset. Alice Hyman and I made a really nice worksheet on how to build a mutual action plan template. So it's a template that we did together a couple of years ago. So I'll find that, and you can stick that in the call notes too, because she is smart. She said this thing that I loved is like, you got to make sure that as the rep, you don't get too far ahead of the customer and leave them in your dust. You got to make sure that you're coming together along their journey together, because if you get too far ahead, then you'll lose them. So you've got to make sure that you're not running ahead, and the mutual action plan is a great way to do that. So shout out to Alice. Yeah.
I had Alice, was actually a board member at PR for a number of years.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Tom, if people are, interested in either Clari or trying to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
I'm on LinkedIn, of course, or tom@clari.com. I genuinely enjoy talking about this stuff. So chances are, if you ping me, we can just get on the call and we can chat for 20 minutes. I really like this stuff.
I think I could tell. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Tom, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Really good fun.
Right on. And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll see you all next week.